What is it that brings joy to your heart this day? Is it the fact that in 2 weeks Christmas will be here? For some, yes, because that means school's out. For some, no, because that means you have to grade papers. But for some, yes, that means I get a break from work. For others, no, because it means the end of the year is right here as well. And you have things that you have to do. For some, joy is here because we get to gather with family and decorate and open presents and eat. For some, that joy is not present. No one to gather with, no presents to open. So maybe we can identify with the people of Isaiah's time. We're not in exile, not going to a strange land, not walking through a hot desert, but maybe we're longing for joy. Hear these words from Isaiah chapter 35. The desert and the dry land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom like the crocus. They will burst into bloom and rejoice with joy and singing. They will receive the glory of Lebanon, the splendor of Carmel and Sharon. They will see God's glory, the splendor of our God. Then the eyes of the blind will be opened. The ears of the deaf will be cleared. Then the lame will leap like the deer, and the tongue of the speechless will sing. Waters will spring in the desert, and streams in the wilderness. The burning sand will become a pool, and the thirsty ground fountains of water. A highway will be there. It will be called the Holy Way. The unclean won't travel on it, but it will be for those walking on the way. Even fools won't get lost on it. No lion will be there, no predator will go up on it. None of these will be there. Only the redeemed will walk on it. The Lord's ransomed ones will return and enter Zion with singing and everlasting joy. Happiness and joy will overwhelm them. Grief and groaning will flee away. An afternoon in a nursing home is like most afternoons. Same routine, some activities, but pretty much the same routine. But at this particular nursing home, on this particular afternoon, at 1:30 in the afternoon, something was different. Residents began to gather in the cafeteria, the hall, for something advertised as drumming with Connie. It seemed something different, maybe interesting to the residents, and so about 30 residents gathered in that place that afternoon for drumming with Connie. They sat as they always do, in a large circle, but as usual, few people spoke to each other. Oh, they knew each other too well, but they just didn't speak to each other. Mostly they just sat in silence. This was another diversion, this drumming with Connie, another diversion to pass the time of the afternoon by until they got to evening dinner. They knew their neighbors, and there were no surprises. It was just an afternoon. But at 1:30, as they waited, Connie made her way in. She pulled on a flatbed cart a bundle of drums. And she began unpacking, and she looked at the residents sitting there in the semicircle and began to wonder, and decide who would get which drums. She noticed those whose hands were fairly active and workable, and she took the big drums to them. Sat them on the floor in front of them. Some she handed mallets to, some she said, "You will use your hands." Some drums could be held between the knees, and to the residents who could do that, she gave drums that they squeezed between their knees and would use. She had some that were given to some patients who were paralyzed on one side, but they were held by a neck strap, these drums, and they could be used even with one hand. Some drums were very large, some were very small. They came in all kinds of sizes and descriptions. There was a hammered silver drum from India, a hand-carved drum from Egypt. There were drums covered in hairy cowskin, drums covered in smooth leather, wooden drums from Nigeria, painted drums from Haiti. You can imagine what this scene looked like that afternoon at 1:30 in that nursing home as they gathered for drumming with Connie. For those who couldn't manage a drum, Connie was prepared. She had maracas. They were easy to hold, light, and easy to use. And as Connie passed these things around that afternoon, the residents began to perk up. A smile began to creep upon their face. Joy began to bloom in their hearts because it had been a long time since someone had given them something valuable and unique and said, "Here, this is for you." And their eyes brightened, and there was an anticipation in the room. And then Connie got in the middle of the circle, and she sat down with her own drum. And she began to teach them what she knew. She told the residents, "It's easy. We'll start with a very simple rhythm, the sound of your heart." She described it to them like this: lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub. This music is music that everyone knows. It was easy. And everyone found within a few seconds that they could all make that sound. They weren't all together just yet, but everyone, even the ones holding the maracas, were doing the rhythm of their heartbeat. Then after a few minutes, they began to beat together in rhythm, lub-dub, lub-dub. And this went on, and Connie said, "Now continue as you're doing. Continue as you're doing, but keep the beat. Don't stop. Just keep the rhythm." And she said, "I'm going to add a note here and there, but keep your rhythm. We'll come back to it in just a bit." And so everyone began to drum. When she drummed louder, all of them drummed louder. When she drummed very softly, they drummed very softly, all in a tempo past soul from soul, drawing on something primitive and sacred, poured out of the darkness. When it came time to end the song, she would count down: 4, beat, beat, 3, beat, beat, 2, beat, beat, 1, beat, beat. And everyone stopped. And then they erupted into applause. Not just any applause, a joyous applause that rang down the hallway. Some of the folks in the nursing home who worked there decided they needed to make their way down to this place to see what was going on as the residents continued their drumming class with Connie. And they got caught up in the rhythm as well. Some of them began to dance in the center of the circle. The maintenance man and the head nurse began to dance together in the circle. Some in the wheelchairs began to dance in their wheelchairs and spin around as they could. She taught them how to make the sound of rain with their fluttering fingertips. She taught them how to make the sound of the wind blowing with hands floating around the drum top. Songs at once eternal and complex, songs as natural as our own skin. A woman with Alzheimer's who sits most of her day in her room in silence was shaking her maraca in time, grinning from ear to ear. And the throbbing drum beats filled the building. Staff members couldn't help themselves as they shared in the joy. And if you think this could have nothing to do with this third Sunday of Advent, this Sunday of joy, then I want to suggest that perhaps you're mistaken. Because these lessons are all about our search for the presence of God, about our yearning for something more to lift us up and to restore our souls. Like the people of Isaiah's time, though we may not see it, we do walk in the desert from time to time. And we look to see the stream of living water come up. We look for the grass and the crocus to bloom. Something that will lift our spirits longer than just a little bit of time. And so Isaiah said, there's a drumbeat yet to hear. You can hear it if you'll listen. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom. The eyes of the blind shall be opened. The ears of the deaf unstopped. Then the lame shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the speechless sing for joy. Maybe from Psalm 146 that Dora read for us. The Lord sets the prisoners free. The Lord opens the eyes of the blind. He lifts up those who are bowed down. This is the good news for each and every one of us. I suspect if we all had our own way, there would be no nursing homes. We would keep everyone in some home around people who loved them, who cared for them, who had superhuman strength and courage and endurance. No one would ever be lonely or afraid. But that is not the way of this poor flesh. We do get sick, and we do hurt, and we do cry, and we long for joy. But God is there, drumming all along, saying, be strong, do not fear. Here is your God. God will save you. Sometimes in ways we cannot always dream or always imagine, God brings us joy. Listen for the drumbeat of God in your heart.